You step through marble halls where the air tastes like ash and silence. The fountains have stopped singing. In Baghdad, that never happens. Water is life here, flowing through every courtyard, every garden, every promise that this city will stand forever. But today the channels run dry, and in that terrible quiet you understand what's coming. The world you knew, the world everyone said could never fall, is about to be swallowed whole. And what happens next won't just destroy a city. It will destroy something worse, the belief that brilliance can protect you from brutality. Before we go deeper into what happened behind those palace walls, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. It genuinely amazes me that a story this dark, from so many centuries ago, still finds its way to screens across the entire world. It's February 1258, and the Abbasid caliphate 800 years old. The golden thread connecting the Prophet Muhammad to the present day is about to end in a week of horror so complete that chroniclers will struggle for generations to write it down. The man at the center is Caliph al-Mustasim, 57th in the line, living in a palace so rich it glows. He's not a warrior. He's a ceremony, a symbol, a man who believes his title is a shield blessed by heaven itself. Outside the walls, Hulagu Khan's Mongol army spreads across the plains like a stain. They've already erased 40 Persian cities. They've turned rivers black with ash and piled skulls into pyramids as warnings. Now they're here for the jewel of the Islamic world, and Hulagu sends one message: surrender or be made into a lesson the whole earth will remember. Al-Mustasim laughs when he reads it. He tells his court that God will not abandon his deputy, that these stepriders, these men without books or cities, cannot touch the sacred. He is certain, the way only a man surrounded by centuries of inherited power can be certain, that the world bends around him, not the other way around. He is wrong in a way that will cost everything. The siege begins like thunder that won't stop. Chinese engineers working for the Mongols bring gunpowder, siege engines, and rockets Baghdad has never seen. Day and night, the walls shake. Towers crack and fold. Defenders fight with everything they have, but courage is just flesh, and flesh breaks under machines designed to break it. By February 5th, the outer walls collapse. By the 10th, resistance is a memory. And on the 13th, Hulagu Khan walks into the throne room, where al-Mustasim has ruled for 36 years, and sees not a deputy of God, but a man in expensive robes who forgot to prepare for the unthinkable. The caliph is forced to his knees. His turban, the crown of spiritual authority over millions, lies in the dust. Hulagu studies him the way you study something that no longer matters. And then he asks a question that chroniclers will repeat for centuries. Where is your God now? Al-Mustasim's lips move in prayer, but no answer comes. And Hulagu, who has seen kings beg in a dozen languages, decides to make this one beg in a way no one will forget. He orders the treasury brought in, mountains of gold and silver, centuries of accumulated wealth heaped into glittering piles. Then he gives the command, make him eat it. Soldiers force coins into the caliph's mouth, gold pressed between his teeth until they crack. Silver shoved down his throat while he chokes. When he tries to turn his head, they beat him until he opens his mouth again. This isn't execution, it's theater, a message written in humiliation and metal, telling the Islamic world that all your treasure, all your history, all your faith can't save you from a man who doesn't care what you believe. When they finally stop, al-Mustasim's stomach is swollen with gold, his breathing shallow, his eyes glazed with shock. But Hulagu isn't finished. He wants the family brought in because a dynasty doesn't end with one man. It ends when there's no one left to carry the name forward. Somewhere beyond the throne room doors, the caliph's children can hear the chaos. Boots on stone, screams in languages they don't recognize, the smell of smoke crawling under doorways. They are 3 sons and 4 daughters, and until yesterday, they were heirs to the oldest empire in Islam. Today, they are about to learn what it means when history decides to move on without you. The first brought forward is Princess Fatima, 27 years old, celebrated across 3 continents for her mind. She spoke 5 languages, studied philosophy, wrote poetry that scholars copied by hand and sent to Damascus and Cairo. She believed, the way brilliant people often do, that knowledge could outlast violence, that being valuable made you safe. She is shoved to her knees in front of her father, and Hulagu gives an order that Persian chronicler Rashid al-Din will later struggle to fully describe. He writes only that what was done to her was done in front of the caliph's eyes, and when it ended, she was no longer alive. Other sources, whispered accounts from survivors, are clearer. Fatima is assaulted by multiple soldiers, one after another, while her father is held in place and forced to watch. When she dies, her body is dragged outside and left for dogs. Let that image settle. A woman whose mind could navigate Aristotle and Al-Farabi, reduced to a message, and her father, the man who believed himself untouchable, now understands exactly how powerless faith becomes when the men holding swords don't share it. But the night isn't over. Hulagu calls for the sons next, and Al-Mustasim, broken and hollow, knows he will not be allowed to look away. The 3 princes Mubarak, 23 Ahmed, 21, and Ali, 14 are dragged forward in chains. They don't understand yet. Yesterday they were planning futures. Today they are standing in a room slick with blood, staring at a conqueror who looks at them like livestock. Hulagu asks them the same question he asked their father. Where is your God now? Prince Mubarak, the eldest, steps forward. Maybe it's courage. Maybe it's the last reflex of a man raised to believe his bloodline means something. He says, Allah will punish you for this. Hulagu nods slowly, almost thoughtfully. Then he gives the order. Mongol tradition holds that royal blood must not be spilled openly, whether superstition or strategy. They believe it brings misfortune, so they kill royalty without visible wounds. For these 3 princes, Hulagu chooses the method of the carpet. Heavy rugs are brought in. The princes are wrapped inside them so tightly they can't move, can't breathe fully, can barely scream. The carpets are laid flat on the marble floor, and then horsemen ride over them again and again. The sound, witnesses will later say, is like wood breaking in pieces, bones collapsing under hooves, voices thinning into nothing. When the carpets are unrolled, there are no wounds to see, just 3 bodies shaped wrong, eyes open, breath gone. Al-Mustasim sits frozen. He doesn't lunge or scream or beg, not because he's strong, but because there's nothing left in him that believes begging has meaning anymore. His sons are dead, and Hulagu still has 3 daughters to deal with. Princess Zainab, 25, Princess Khadija, 20, and Princess Aisha, 12 years old, so small her bracelets slide down her wrists. For them, Hulagu decides execution is wasteful. Mongol custom often spared noble women from death, but not from displacement. They become trophies, proof that conquest doesn't just take land, it takes futures. Zainab and Khadija are given to Mongol generals as rewards. They are dragged thousands of miles into the steppe, into felt tents and endless horizons, into a world that doesn't speak their language or know their names. A Mongol document uncovered centuries later briefly mentions 2 Arab women of high birth given to General Kitbuka after Baghdad's fall, and then nothing. No graves, no children who carried the name forward. They don't die on paper. They simply stop existing. But little Aisha isn't handed over. Hulagu keeps her, not as a concubine, but as a living monument to erasure. He forces her into Mongol clothing, forces her to learn Mongolian, forces her to abandon her name. Decades later, a Persian traveler writes of meeting an elderly woman in Tabriz who claimed she was Aisha, daughter of the last caliph. She would have been nearly 80 by then, bent with age, her Arabic broken and mixed with the language of her captors. She barely remembered Baghdad, but she remembered the night her family died. She remembered Hulagu leaning close and whispering something only she could hear. "You are the last. Your line ends with you." And she said, with eyes that had spent a lifetime swallowing grief, that he was right. Think about that. A child who should have grown up in sunlight and silk, who instead grows old in exile, carrying the ashes of an empire inside her chest, living long enough to watch the world forget she ever mattered. Back in the throne room, Al-Mustasim still breathes, barely. His stomach is ruined from gold. His spirit has been dismantled piece by piece. He has watched his children destroyed in ways designed not just to kill, but to humiliate, to erase, to make sure no story survives where the caliph's family died with dignity. But Hulagu saves the final act for ceremony. He orders the caliph wrapped in a carpet, just like his sons, tight, suffocating, dark, but no horses come this time. Instead, the Mongols build a wooden platform directly above him, and on that platform they hold a feast. Hulagu and his generals sit overhead, eating roasted meat, drinking wine, laughing and telling stories, while the man beneath them slowly dies. Every shift of weight presses the carpet deeper. Every burst of laughter steals a little more air. The feast lasts all night. At dawn, when the last cups are drained, they roll the carpet open. Rashid al-Din describes the body, face purple, eyes open, no wound in sight, just the frozen evidence of suffocation. 800 years of Abbasid rule ends there, not in battle, but under a party floor. And the horror doesn't stop at the palace. Without a caliph, Baghdad becomes a body without a head. The Mongols pour into the streets like floodwater. They slaughter without pause merchants, scholars, imams, children, beggars. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is you lived in a city Hulagu decided must vanish. Whole neighborhoods are erased in hours. Bodies pile so thick that horses struggle to step through. Chroniclers estimate close to 1 million dead, though the real number is unknowable because there's no one left to count. The killing is methodical, organized, not frantic. District by district, street by street, house by house. If they find someone hiding, that person is dragged into the open and cut down. If a family runs, riders chase them like animals. If a crowd gathers in a mosque hoping sanctuary still means something, they are slaughtered where they kneel. Then the Mongols turn to the House of Wisdom, the legendary library, the brain of the Islamic world. Manuscripts from Greece, Persia, India, texts that exist nowhere else on earth, scientific treatises, medical discoveries, philosophical debates, astronomical charts, poetry that took lifetimes to perfect. They throw books into the Tigris until the river runs black with ink, then red with blood. Pages choke the current. The water becomes a moving bruise. One scholar, Ibn al-Fuate, survives by hiding in a well for 3 days. When he crawls out, Baghdad is silent. He writes that the streets were covered with corpses, the air smelled of death, and dogs fed on bodies because there was no one left to bury them. Imagine walking through your own city and hearing nothing but flies. Imagine smoke and ink and rot mixing in the air. Imagine a civilization losing not just its people, but its memory, its arguments, its discoveries, its dreams shredded and scattered like ash. Baghdad isn't just a city, it's the intellectual capital of the world, the place where human knowledge has been gathered, translated, preserved, and expanded for centuries. And in 7 days, it becomes a graveyard so vast it has no edges. The Mongol Empire will last another century and a half. It will conquer more land than any empire before it. But there is one thing it cannot conquer: remembrance. Even as Baghdad falls, the story of what happened to the caliph's family survives. Survivors scatter into the desert, into distant cities, into tiny villages where no one cares about dynasties. And at night, in whispers, they tell their children what they saw. Not all of it, not the worst pieces, but enough. Enough to keep memory alive. Enough that the Abbasid name doesn't vanish entirely, even though the Mongols tried their best to erase it. History is stubborn like that. You can destroy buildings, you can burn books, you can crush bloodlines, but you can't crush the human need to remember, to record, to pass on what happened so it won't happen again. The story spreads through fragments, a letter here, a chronicle there, a traveler's account copied in another city. Rashid Eldon writes it down decades later, still struggling with the horror. Abdulmalik Juvayni records what he heard from witnesses. Venetian merchants who fled the chaos carry pieces of the story back to Europe. Each fragment is incomplete, but together they build a picture of what happened in those 7 days. A picture so terrible that even enemies of the caliphate are shaken by it. Because what the Mongols did to the royal family wasn't just murder, it was symbolic annihilation. Forcing the caliph to eat gold meant showing that wealth is meaningless. Crushing the princes without spilling blood meant obeying tradition while destroying it. Violating Fatima in front of her father meant shattering the idea that knowledge or nobility could protect you. Giving the daughters away meant erasing their future. Keeping Aisha meant turning her into a living ghost. Proof that your name, your language, your history could all be taken from you while you still breathed. It was a message written in cruelty, meant to travel, and it worked. Across the Middle East, leaders hear what happened in Baghdad and start opening gates without a fight. Hulagu doesn't need to kill as many thousands anymore because Baghdad has already killed millions for him in fear. The siege becomes a legend, a warning, a nightmare that makes rulers calculate whether resistance is worth the price. And the answer, again and again, is no. But even as the Mongol army rides west, even as the smoke clears and the river slowly washes itself clean, the Islamic world can't stop staring at what happened inside that palace. Not because they want to relive it, but because they need to understand it. Because if something like that can happen to Baghdad, the jewel of the world, the city of wisdom, the heart of the caliphateage, can happen anywhere. And that realization changes history. The Islamic Golden Age doesn't vanish overnight, but its center of gravity shifts. Cities that once sent scholars to Baghdad become the new hubs: Cairo, Damascus, later Samarkand, and beyond. Libraries start getting built like fortresses. Rulers stop trusting in divine protection alone and start building thicker walls, hiring larger armies, paying closer attention to threats from the east. The world keeps moving, but it moves with a scar. You can trace that scar through centuries, in the way people talk about Baghdad, in the way the fall becomes a parable, a moment when everything changed. Al-Musta'sim believed his title made him immortal. He believed God would never let Baghdad die. But faith without realism became its own kind of blindness. And if there's one lesson this story carves into history, it's this: no civilization, no matter how brilliant, how advanced, how sacred, is immune to collapse if it stops paying attention to the world outside its walls. If it mistakes tradition for strength, if it assumes that what has always been will always be. The fountains went silent first. Not fire, not screams, just stillness. That quiet hush before the end, when everything still looks normal, but something fundamental has already shifted. Because that's how disasters often begin, not with thunder, but with the absence of sound you didn't realize you were listening for. And by the time you notice the silence, the storm is already inside the gates, and all that's left is to watch what you built burn and wonder if there was ever a moment when it could have been stopped.